Mr. Chairman. Welcome to all of our witnesses. I would especially like to thank Ms. Minter for coming today. There's no greater pain than the pain of losing your child. And so I thank you for having the strength and the courage to speak publicly and to appear before us about all of these matters today. I also want to thank the busy public officials from Virginia, Sheriff Kincaid and Commonwealth's Attorney Descano. We know how busy your schedules are, and we thank you for coming to be part of this process. I have family in Virginia. Not everybody in my family is in Maryland. I once spent a summer in Richmond, Virginia, and I feel somehow like I'm back in Virginia with all these great Virginians here. And we're on a mission of analyzing Virginia law and public policy today. This hearing would probably be better taking place in Richmond before the General Assembly, because we're doing a deep dive into the prosecutorial and jail policy decisions of one county, Fairfax County, which was recently ranked, I noted, by the Major Cities Chiefs Association as the safest county of its size in the entire United States of America. So its people, its elected officials, certainly do not deserve the contempt and the derision of this committee. If we were going to superintend and scrutinize the actions taking place within the government of Virginia, perhaps we should be looking at the recent decision by the Virginia State Supreme Court to overturn the express will of the people of Virginia in redistricting their congressional districts. But that investigation into an episode of extreme judicial activism might not suit the ideological purposes of the majority quite so much. The ranking member has done an excellent job of providing an overview of the problems and limitations with the particular conception of this hearing. What we have on one side is a massively funded federal bureaucracy, which just got $175 billion last year, accomplished by slashing funds for Medicaid, children's health insurance, rural hospitals, and so on. DHS now has 250,000 employees and a budget larger than that of 150 countries on Earth. It has over 80,000 sworn officers, more than the number of police officers, check this out, in New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, Houston, Washington, D.C., Las Vegas, and Dallas combined. And yet, despite this massive bureaucracy and this awesome budget, the administration is trying to blame the problems in immigration law and policy over which the people of Fairfax County have no control, other than as citizens voting for representatives in Congress, trying to blame these local jurisdictions like the sheriff's office, whose annual budget is not $175 billion, but if the internet is correct, I just looked it up, is $85 million, which is much less than 1,000th of the Homeland Security budget. And yet, the federal government or Congress, rather than actually engaging in the process of studying and passing comprehensive immigration reform, prefers to bully and scapegoat local jurisdictions which are trying to deal with the failures of federal policy. Look, ICE and the Department of Homeland Security have a job to do, and they should do it. And they should do it without violating the law. They should do it without violating the Constitution. They should do it without killing U.S. citizens like Renee Good and Alex Preddy. But they have a job to do, and the government of Fairfax County has a job to do. And these public officials have a job of enforcing the criminal laws of Virginia as chosen by the people of Virginia within all of the constraints of state and federal law. Now, as I understand it, and this is what I'm interested in because I'm not familiar with what is taking place in Fairfax County or in Virginia, but as I understand it, ICE can come and pick up undocumented prisoners for a period of days or weeks before they are discharged. And this has happened before, and The local and state government, contrary to what we just heard, cooperates fully with the federal government in these cases. The idea that they don't cooperate is just wrong. ICE can come and pick them up before their point of discharge, and as I understand it, and I want to hear more about this, they can pick them up at the point of discharge. But Fairfax County, as I understand it, takes the position it cannot hold prisoners beyond the length and duration of their lawful sentence. And I want to hear about that. But I'm curious, why can ICE not pick up, with its massive resources, why can they not pick up the prisoners while they are still being held? Or right before they're about to be released, or at the point of discharge? I don't really understand that. And then, again, I understand everybody is eager to beat up on Fairfax County for some reason, but in terms of the specific terrible case we're going to talk about today, we're going to hear about this Abdul Jallo, the Sierra Leone national who's accused of brutally murdering Ms. Minter's daughter, Stephanie. He was actually in ICE custody from 2018 through 2019 during the first Trump administration before they released him back into the public. As I understand it, I want to get to the bottom of that report. Why was he not removed back to Sierra Leone when the Trump administration held him in 2018 and 2019? That is a critical question that I have in terms of trying to define responsibility, if all of this is just a blame game that we're engaged in. It would be far more meaningful for us to be talking about comprehensive immigration reform. I think that's what Americans and Virginians are looking to Congress for, not to be scrutinizing and demonizing particular cities or counties around the country, which does not strike me as a very productive exercise. Nonetheless, I'm delighted to hear from all of our witnesses here, and I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.